Welcome to Changing Higher Ed, a podcast dedicated to helping higher education leaders improve their institutions. With your host, Dr. Drumm McNaughton, CEO of The Change Leader, a consultancy that helps higher ed leaders holistically transform their institutions. Learn more at changinghighered.com. And now, here's your host, Drumm McNaughton.
Thank you, David. Our guest today is Dr. Marielena DeSanctis, President of the Community College of Denver. Dr. DeSanctis has more than 23 years of experience in education, including classroom teaching, curriculum development, instructional design, learning assessment, and progressive leadership roles in both K-12 and higher education. Dr. DeSanctis is one of the few people whose experience includes K-12 and higher ed, and she joins us today to talk about something she's uniquely qualified to talk about, the steps that higher ed must take to create new pathways for college education. Marie, welcome to the show.
Hi, glad to be here.
Glad to have you as well. This is going to be a fun conversation. You are my first president that I've had on the show that's had both K-12 and higher ed experience. So you're going to be able to see things from a very different perspective than most guests.
Well, I certainly hope so, and I certainly hope that helps advance something in education.
Absolutely. Well, I'm sure it will. So before we get into our topic for today, tell the guest a little bit about who you are and your background, that kind of stuff, if you would.
Sure. As Drumm said, Marielena DeSanctis, most people just call me Marie. Born and raised in South Florida, the Fort Lauderdale, West Palm Beach area, to a mother of Cuban descent. She came to the United States in 1961. My dad, Finnish and Irish. So first generation in the United States on my mother's side, and my mom graduated from college the same week that I graduated from kindergarten. So not exactly first generation college student, but pretty close. I went off to Georgia Tech, actually, Drumm, and got a mechanical engineering degree, which I'm not sure you and I have spoken about, and spent some time in engineering working on major water and wastewater treatment plants all over the country, which entailed a ton of travel. Was a young mom, starting a family, started thinking about what was next for me in engineering. And I wasn't quite sure. I didn't know if it was a big engineering firm, if it was doing something different, but I knew it wasn't what I was doing then. So I took a gap year before a gap year became popular as a term and went to go teach math and physics at a high school in South Florida. That was 1998. Here we are in 2023, and I am still in education. So I taught for 6 years. I became a public school, high school assistant principal. I became the principal of Fort Lauderdale High, which is the oldest high school in Broward County, Florida, and became the assistant superintendent of curriculum and instruction. I think in a lot of districts you would call that a chief academic officer, but Broward County, being the sixth largest public school district in the country, actually delineates a couple of different assistant superintendent roles. I was getting ready to think about applying for K-12 superintendencies and had really been working nationally across the K-12 landscape, doing some consulting stuff out in Modesto, California. I was working with a school over in Puerto Rico that was getting ready to be reconstituted for failing to make adequate yearly progress for 7+ years. So really just this broad reach in K-12, even outside of South Florida. Obviously interacting with our local community college, Broward College, quite a bit. That president kept telling my superintendent, "Oh, I'm going to steal her one day." They would have a giggle. He would say, "I'm not kidding." They would giggle some more. And this went on and on and on for a couple months when the president of Broward College at that time, David Armstrong, amazing leader, reached out to me and said, "Hey, you know how I keep telling Superintendent Runcie that I'm going to steal you one day? Well, today's the day." And Drumm, I said, let me step through that door. What's the worst thing that can possibly happen? I've got a national reputation in K-12. If I don't like it, I'm not good at it, I can always step back into K-12, but I really want to know what happens to students after I've handed them that diploma on stage for their high school graduation, I want to deeply know what the college experience is about. And I think that I have something to lend to college in bringing in students from high school. What I came to find, of course, is that community college doesn't just serve students that come right out of high school, but the whole gamut of people that are either changing careers later on in life or put college on hold for a long time and wanted to come back. And I fell in love with the mission of community colleges and how it is that a community college can really be the nexus and the impetus for economic development of the community that it serves. So here I am, president of the Community College of Denver.
Well, that's a long way from South Florida.
Yes, it is, and a lot colder.
Really? I never would have guessed that. So, Marie, you find yourself here at the Community College of Denver. You've got all this K-12 experience, multiple roles. What do you see that colleges can do to pave the way for first-gen students? I mean, right now we look out there, 50% of all the, quote, college-age students are not going to college. Is that a problem? Is it something we need to worry about?
Drumm, it's an incredible problem. Right here in Denver, our Denver public schools, high school graduates, on average, 50% of them are not moving on to technical college, community college, or university after they graduate. And it's a huge problem, particularly when 80% of that 50% that's not going to any of those post-secondary options are students of color. And then we wonder in Colorado why there's such a huge post-secondary attainment gap between Hispanic students and white residents, Black residents and white residents. So it's a huge problem. What can colleges do? It's really a partnership between that college and the high schools in the area, because the students really need to deeply believe that they can be college students and they can be successful at being college students, and that there's a return on investment in being a college student, both not only in the tuition that they're going to pay or apply for financial aid and grants for, but the time that it takes to get that post-secondary credential and the time that takes away from being in the workforce, being with their family, those types of things. And that doesn't happen overnight. That does not happen because a college comes to the high school and does a little information session, or the college puts on a welcome your local high school day and they come over and hear a little presentation and do a little campus tour. That has to be a well thought out formal program that has multiple touch points through all 4 years of that student's high school experience with a college in that area. Even if they ultimately end up going to a different college or university, somebody has to be the main partner with that high school to really get those students to know that they are college bound, believe that they can be successful in college, and have built the support network that when they start to doubt themselves after they've made that leap and applied and gotten in, that we don't end up losing them over that summer or whatever time period there is between their high school graduation and going to college.
I'm going to go into a little bit of psychology, if you don't mind, because I don't understand. This was totally anesthetic. For me, it was like it was assumed you were going to college. That was it. Why is it that so many people don't want to go or don't feel like they need to go?
Oh gosh, Strom. I don't know that I'm the expert in that. I can only speak to this from my own life experience. So going back to what you just said, when I was growing up, my mother, having come from Cuba in 1961, leaving everything behind, including her mother. She didn't know when she was going to see her mother again. She left all her clothes behind, her toys behind, everything. And she raised us with this notion that the only thing that people cannot take away from you is your education. And education is the way that you allow yourself to have as many opportunities as possible. You think about it. I have a mechanical engineering degree from Georgia Tech and I'm a college president. If I would have gone to college and gotten a degree in education I couldn't go apply to an engineering firm, right? So it was not only education, but it was what is the highest, most rigorous amount of education that you can get is going to give you the most options. So, like you, I didn't grow up thinking, am I going to go to college? It was, where am I going to college? So it starts with that conversation in the household. So, really, when you're thinking about first generation students, you're not only convincing that student, but you need to convince that family because it is a family affair to send a first generation student. For that reason, at the Community College of Denver, we have a very unique graduation in which we do it outside. We have a DJ, it's all day. Families can come for 15 minutes, receive diploma and leave, or they can stay for 4 or 5 hours and enjoy DJs and food trucks and all of that. But at the point in time in which the student receives their diploma, they bring on stage whoever they want to. Sometimes the student brings their dog and they say, that's the only family I have. Sometimes they bring 30 strong, tios and tias and abuelo and abuela and, this whole family unit because the whole family participated in that student going to college. So it starts with that conversation at home about the expectation that you're going to college. And when you're talking about a first generation student, how do people who never went to college build that expectation in their child? That's really hard to do.
It's interesting you bring that up because one of my good friends is Russell Lowry Hart.
Mine as well.
Yeah, incredible man. One of the things that when he came to Amarillo, which is where he is right now, the usual interviews, and he asked the folks in enrollment, what do you need to be more successful? And they said, laptops. Give us laptop computers. And, it's like, well, why? Well, it's because they don't have people come to their offices. They go out to people's homes and they have to have laptops with them to be able to show what's going on, because you're not selling the kids, you're selling the entire family. And,
Absolutely.
selling isn't the right word, but we all know what we mean. You're you're enrolling the entire family.
You are. You have to think about it in the terms of the opportunity cost, number one. And number two, depending on that family's ethnic background, there are very strong familial ties and roles that people play within that family. And you're doing something different, right? You're asking them to put aside working in order to spend some time in school. You may be asking for somebody in that family unit now to step away from a traditional role in their family because they're having to spend some time in the classroom and doing homework. So it's a larger conversation than just, hey, come to college. And you also have to be attentive to broadening their perspective of what post-secondary education options are and what careers those lead to. All of us suffer from we don't know what we don't know.
Except for you and me.
Oh no, I suffer from what I don't know all the time. And this comes from a Virgo that normally would not admit to that. But I suffer from I don't know what I don't know all the time. So you think about particularly how quickly the labor market landscape has been changing over the last 10, 15 years, and certainly going to do nothing but continue an acceleration towards jobs of the future, not even being imagined today. Breaking them out of, I want to be X because my next door neighbor is, my aunt is, my cousin is, right? And really thinking about different careers that propel them into a different quintile of economic mobility and economic capital.
Mm-hmm. It's kind of like yourself being an engineer, or me, Naval Academy, physics, etc. Who'd have thunk we'd have been in education?
Who'd have thunk? Here we are.
Here we are on a podcast, no less.
On a podcast, no less. Although I feel like what I do pretty much all day is engineer. As a college president, you are identifying the problem, creating a hypothesis, putting together an action plan, executing the action plan, measuring the results. If it works, phenomenal. Do more of it. If it doesn't, retreat, stop, cease and desist. Start with new hypothesis.
Which makes perfect sense. It's, systems thinking, holistic thinking.
It is.
You're looking for what the outcomes are and you tweak things to change your outcomes.
You're looking for patterns. You're looking for outcomes.
So with these first-gen students, and frankly, with any student, you've got to make them believe they can be successful. You've got to provide the support structures so that they can be caught when they start doubting themselves, and then help them navigate the policies and the processes that they've got to go through, going out to their homes, getting them enrolled, getting the people convinced. But then you've got to have those support services at the schools as well, and being able to monitor progress.
Absolutely. It's not just navigating the policies and processes to get into college, but again, if you're a first generation in college student or near first generation in college student, as I was, sometimes you don't necessarily have the answers coming to you at home. I think about when I went to Georgia Tech, there were a lot of things that my mom just couldn't answer for me because she had been an adult student in a community college and then transferred into a bachelor's degree where I was in a very traditional R1 research university. So even though I wasn't first generation, I was kind of left a little bit on my own to navigate the nuances of Georgia Tech. And the same thing happens today with students. They don't necessarily intuitively know that they can petition to the academic standards committee for an extenuating circumstance to have an administrative drop from their course. They don't necessarily know that when they're transferring, if the university tells them, oh, we're not going to accept that credit as equivalent credit, that they can advocate for themselves and that there's somebody at the community college that can go beat up on the university and say, no, that's not what we do when we're transferring students between the two of us. So there's all of these little nuances of navigation from course number one through graduation that those of us who have gone to traditional universities 4 years to get our bachelor's degree know, but students don't, right? Even simple things like naming your cashier's office the bursar's office. I'll never forget the day I was walking around at Broward College and this student was like, I need to pay for my tuition. Where's the cashier? And we were literally standing in front of the cashier, but the sign said bursar. That means nothing to a student, nothing. And it's just simple things like that you really have to step outside of yourself and think, if I didn't have the experience that I have, what does this campus look like to me? How would I know to do X, Y, or Z to navigate myself successfully through this very complex world of post-secondary education?
Well, you have that piece, which should go into your orientation. But when you've got kids who are coming in that have no association with college whatsoever, that makes it doubly or triply more difficult. I remember having a guest on. She was the president of Lucy Cavendish College, University of Cambridge. And, a few people have heard of Cambridge before.
One or two.
One or two. They got to where they are enrolling 90% people from public schools. This is huge. And what they've done, and we're going to get into this part in just a little bit, what they've done is they've gone down and they've reached into high-performing high schools to bring folks in, and they work with them while they're still in high school. And then they have what they call a bridging week, which they bring all these first-gen students in and put them through mini exams. They use a tutorial model, small group discussions, etc. They expose them to everything, and they give them an incredible tour of their campus, because Cambridge, as you know, is made up of, 20 plus different colleges. So where are you going to go for each class? So when they get to the orientation, they're already ready to get started.
That's fantastic. And when you said an orientation, I think because of expediency, efficiency, whatever the case may be, we tend to design these half day, full day orientations for students. All the while, we know that the research says that after 20 minutes, we all lose focus. I don't care how old you are, we all lose focus. That's it. We're done. As a matter of fact, we're probably 20 minutes into this podcast, and 90% of the people aren't listening to us anymore because
I've already
we've
lost focus.
right, we've totally exhausted their attention span. And yet we believe that we can hit a first generation and college student with 6 hours worth of information and they're going to remember it. So what we did when I was at Broward College was take all of that content and build it into our learning management system so that students always had access to these modules about, hey, I seem to remember hearing about different clubs on campus. Well, now they could go watch the module about clubs on campus and how to connect into those. Hey, I seem to remember hearing about this extenuating circumstances committee, but I don't remember what the process was. You could go click on that module and go through that. Otherwise, they're just drinking out of a fire hose. They might catch 10% of what it was that you said, and it's gone. You might as well have never had the orientation.
Mm-hmm. And we're not only talking about high school students, we're talking about adults because adults are coming back to school as well.
Absolutely, particularly in community colleges. We have, I would say, roughly 30% of our student population are over the age of 25.
Mm-hmm. And those type of students have different demands. What comes to mind is what Stephen Katsoros did at Arupe College, which is part of Loyola Chicago. They started a community college, same high academic standards as Loyola, but they brought in multiple adults. Their graduation rates were phenomenal. 2-year graduation rate was over 50%, and the 3-year was over 75%. Same standards.
That's impressive.
These folks need to work, so their classes were in the morning and they'd work in the afternoon or vice versa. They had all sorts of arrangements with local employers to be able to make sure these folks had jobs. Incredible structure that they put together there.
Well, that's fantastic. I wasn't aware of that, and I will definitely look into them.
Yeah. Stephen is with the Come to Believe network out of New York. And what they do is they put together the funding models to get other schools to put these kind of programs together. So Come to Believe network.
Okay. Thank you. I learned something new today.
Well, we all do. So with this, you've got to get the sense of belonging for high school students. You've got to have them with the right funding, etc. There's the dual enrollment versus AP. Tell me a little bit about that.
This is a little bit of an interesting phenomena that materializes within a high school. So, depending on what state you're in, several states incentivize high schools for having students take a college level course or the equivalent. So whether that is advanced placement, whether that's ACE, your Cambridge program, your international baccalaureate programs, your IB, or depending on the state, they either call it concurrent enrollment or dual enrollment, which is where they're taking an actual college course. So what ends up happening in a high school is you start inadvertently, purposefully, sometimes it's conscious, sometimes it's not, but really thinking about your students who are more likely to go out of state to a traditional R1 university. You push them towards these advanced placement ACE IB because they're universally accepted. You score a 3 or higher on an advanced placement exam, most universities will give you the credit towards that equivalent course at the university, depending. Georgia Tech, Even with a 5 in calculus back in the day, they didn't care. You were taking calculus all over again. But by and large, advanced placement, ACE, IB, universally accepted. Concurrent enrollment or dual enrollment courses, even within the same state, sometimes a university that is publicly funded by that state will not accept as equivalent credit the community college course credit. So you end up with this stratification within the high school of advanced placement, IB, ACE, and dual enrollment or concurrent enrollment based on where the high school counselor or teacher or athletic coach or whatever advises the student to go based on where they think they're going later, which is very, very dangerous. The other thing that happens in dual enrollment and concurrent enrollment is depending on the funding structure within the state, those college courses are either taken by the high school students at the college predominantly or at the high school. So, for example, in Florida, the cost to a school district to send a student to the college has fluctuated from zero to I think it was $78, $79 a credit hour at one point in time, back to zero, but minimal. In Colorado, it does not cost the school district anything. Actually, in some cases, they get financially incentivized to offer these college courses in the high school, and then they have to pay tuition to send them to the college. I propose that at the point in time in which a high school student is sitting in their high school building with a teacher that they may have taken for another high school class during their high school career, with the bell ringing every 50 minutes, with the announcements, with the cheerleaders running up and down the hallway on a Friday before a football game, that student cannot possibly feel like a college student. They just feel like they're taking an advanced or honors high school class. You're not building a sense that I am a college student. I have been successful in a college class. I identify with this college while they're sitting in the desk that they sat in 3 years ago for a course in their high school. So there's all of these things at play that I don't know that people are paying attention to at the state policy level, at the legislative level. They get these reports of how many students are finishing high school with, 30 or more college credits. That's fantastic. It's saving a lot of people a lot of money towards their ultimate 4-year degree. And at the same time, it's not necessarily helping our most fragile students that don't see themselves as college students make that transition to believing that they are a college student, as evidenced by the fact that 50% of Denver public schools high school graduates aren't going on to technical college, community college, or university, despite the fact that many of them took concurrent enrollment classes sitting in their high school.
Which makes perfect sense. And then you've got the other side of it, the college perspective. Are you going to accept the credits? What does a faculty think? Et cetera, et cetera. Let's talk at it from the college perspective as well.
Sure. So from the college perspective, again, very dependent on state policy and the state higher education system expectations for how colleges and universities are going to comport themselves. So, Drumm, I don't care if people want to look at this from a social justice angle or they want to look at it from an economics angle. Either way, it's wrong. It is unbelievable to me that it is acceptable, allowed by anyone that a student takes a course from a publicly funded institution of higher education in a state that is accredited by the exact same accrediting agency as the university that is publicly funded in that state that's a mile away, and that university is allowed to say, oh no, you need to take that class all over again. You took Psychology 1 at the community college. We're going to transfer it as credit but it's going to be unspecified elective credit. You need to take our Psychology 1 class in order to advance through your degree. Taxpayers in that state are paying for that class twice, right? The state's funding the FTE enrollment twice. Students are paying tuition, whether they're personally paying or they're using federal Pell Grants or whatever towards that tuition twice for the same class. How this is allowed to happen in many of our states is probably the soapbox that I'm on the most right now. I'm coming from a state that since the mid 60s has had a common course numbering system for the most part, other than the couple of universities that managed to get preeminent status in the state and have a handful of courses that they're allowed to make students take over again. If you take ENC 1101 at a community college, any one of the 28 community colleges in the state of Florida, it has to be accepted by the public universities. Bad example because ENC 1101 is one of those ones that the 3 preeminent universities are allowed to not accept. MAT 1140 will use. It
Okay.
has to transfer, right? The university is not allowed to, and this has been going on since the mid 60s. So it's just de facto at this point. Nobody argues about it. No, it's just the way it is. And, here on a 150-acre campus that's shared by a community college and 2 universities, the 3 presidents have come to find that we have our own issues, literally sharing buildings with one another, literally sharing adjunct faculty with each other. We will have an adjunct faculty member teach the course at the community college. Same adjunct faculty member is teaching the equivalent course over at the university. And yet the full-time faculty at the university say, no, the student needs to take that course over again. We cannot move this country forward in equity of post-secondary attainment when we allow that to happen. It just cannot. There's just no way around that. When you have a student that now transfers to a university and finds that they need to take 15 credit hours, 18 credit hours, 21 credit hours over again, I propose that you have a very high risk of losing that student. So I know that the university may think that they're building revenue by making students take these courses over again. I would suggest that the number of students that are leaving community colleges across this country and a year later not showing up in National Student Clearinghouse data as enrolled in a university might have something to do with the equivalency of credit in transfer.
I suspect you're absolutely right. So, what can college presidents do about this?
I think they do the same thing that I've been doing with my sisters here on the Auraria campus. To the credit of the president of the Metropolitan State University at Denver, Dr. Janine Davidson, and the chancellor of the University of Colorado at Denver, Dr. Michelle Marks, the 3 of us sat down and I presented the issue. And I think at first there was, to be completely transparent and honest, a little defensiveness, a little, no, I don't think this is going on. And to their credit, they said, you know what? The 3 of us are going to write a charge to a task force, and we are going to charge them with being open and transparent about exactly what's going on between our 3 institutions. And we are going to ask for monthly reports, and we're going to ask for a report at the end of the year and an action plan for how it is that we move forward. And the directive came from the top. It came from myself, president at MSU, the chancellor at CU Denver, and that team met monthly. And sure enough, they found that there were courses that were not transferring as equivalent credit. And the president said, we can't have this happen, all 3 of us. So whether that means that the Community College of Denver needs to change our course learning objectives for some courses in order to better align, or it means that the university faculty need to say, okay, yes, 95% of these course learning objectives are the same. It's okay. we're going to accept that. That's what we've done and found several courses now that we do have equivalency of transfer and credit. I think even more impactful, and really have to give credit to MSU, is that even if the course was considered equivalent in credit, if the community college had brought it in through a prior learning assessment, credit for prior learning, they automatically would not accept it, even if otherwise they would. They've really sat down and thought about that, and they have now changed that policy that if the course is otherwise considered equivalent credit, whether we physically taught it or we went through our process to give credit because of prior learning, we executed that assessment, they would also accept it as equivalent. And of course, since the Colorado Community College system is a common course numbering, it doesn't just affect the students that are here at the Community College of Denver. It affects all community college students throughout the state of Colorado, which makes me happy. Makes me happy.
Oh, that's great. Marie, this has just flown by. 3 takeaways for college and university presidents.
Definitely, you have to put a robust program in place to help students in high school see themselves as college students. And again, that's not an information session. It's not one day at the college or university. It is a program that has multiple touch points across their career in high school. I think definitely college presidents and university presidents need to grow a backbone when they're talking with their faculty about equivalency of credit and transfer, and how what they think they're doing by thinking that they're going to bring more students into their class by not accepting the credit is probably not working for us. And we're in a declining enrollment environment. We need to think about how we are doing some of these things to make sure that we have the most students in our classes. And I think the other thing is you cannot create a sense of belonging on your campus for students, 30,000 students at a time. You really need to.
Really?
You can't. But, as I say that, I can guarantee you that there's a couple of college presidents and university presidents that are like, ooh, what does she mean? I mean, you can't have stuff that's spray and pray. You have to organize your students by something. I don't care if you do it alphabetically. I don't care if you do it by age. I don't care if you do it by what is their favorite color. I suggest that maybe by their program of study is a great way to do it. But you need to organize smaller groups of students, assign all of your employees, not just the advisor, not just the faculty member that they happen to have this semester, to wrap around those students, empower them with the data of how the student's doing, have they registered, how to contact the student, and that student belongs to that group no matter what. So I struggle with, okay, well, we have a business pathway. Oh, but that student's not in the business pathway this semester because they happen to be taking math, English, and psychology. No. They're still in the business pathway, and the people in that business pathways still need to be following up with that student, supporting that student, contacting that student, those types of things. So how it is that you take large colleges and universities and break them into manageable pieces, number one, certainly improves the sense of belonging for students, but most importantly, it improves the sense of accountability for the people in the building. And not being able to hide behind, well, enrollment is the business of student services, or enrollment is the business of our admissions and advisors. Faculty are the most impactful in enrollment. They're the ones who see our students the most. They're the ones that have the most communication with our students. They're the ones that shape what students believe about themselves and believe about the quality of the education that they're receiving. So those would be my 3 things.
Well, those are great. That reminds me of first accreditation visit I ever did was at a high school in California. And the principal there was an incredible, incredible person. He had created a culture there that was to die for. He had a saying, I've remembered it to this day. Kids don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
100% true. And I can tell you that people smell not being authentic about that from a mile away. Even you and I do, right? When somebody actually really cares about you and when they're just pretending. And pretending's not going to cut it.
No, absolutely not. What's next for you, Marie?
Gosh, I think surviving all of these things that I'm being very loud about, right? I'm running around the state of Colorado talking about equivalency of credit and, legislators saying, but I thought we had a bill around that. No, you have a bill that says that they'll transfer the credit, but here's the game that they're playing, right? There's a lot of people not very happy with Marie DeSanctis right now for bringing this to the forefront. And there's a whole lot of people right now not happy with the fact that I am questioning how a really impactful piece of legislation that we had last year that would have allowed community colleges to leverage the state of Colorado high school graduation guidelines to create our own pathway to high school graduation within the community college fell apart because school districts came in and said, oh, but they have to follow our structure for how it is that you graduate from high school instead of making up their own based on the guidelines. So we let the interests of school districts and superintendents stand in the way of the progress that we tried to make. So I'm being loud about a lot of really unpopular things. So what's next for me is survival, trying not to get myself fired. But at the same time, I'm doing this in the name of what's right and what's right for being able to move the post-secondary attainment agenda, particularly for students of color. So if I get fired, I do have a real estate license in the state of Florida. I guess I'll be selling houses by the beach. I don't know.
Well, that's not a bad job to have, but my sense is you'd be able to go back and start a superintendency as well. So
I don't know. I'm going to keep doing what's right and keep saying what I think is right, and hopefully I survive it.
I hope so as well. We need more folks like you who are willing to step up to the plate. Marie, thank you. This has been an incredible pleasure for me.
Drumm, it's been an incredible pleasure for me. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on, and I hope that one or two things that I said sparks an idea in somebody, or at least supports them to know that there's another crazy college president out there trying to shake things up.
Very good. Well, add me to your list. Thank you. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening, and a special thank you to my guest, Dr. Marie DeSanctis, President of the Community College of Denver, and for her sharing with us the steps higher ed must take to create new pathways to a college degree. Tune in next week when Eric Hogue, President of Colorado Christian University, joins us to talk about freedom of speech on campus and what presidents and boards can do to ensure we teach students to think critically about what they hear, not just to tune it out when they don't agree with it. Thanks for listening. Until next time.
Changing Higher Ed is a production of The Change Leader, a consultancy committed to transforming higher ed institutions. Find more information about this topic, along with show notes on this episode at changinghighered.com. If you've enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe to the show, and we would also value your honest rating and review. Email any questions, comments, or recommendations for topics or guests to podcast@changinghighered.com. Changing Higher Ed is produced and hosted by Dr. Drumm McNaughton, post-production by David L. White.